What would you think if I told you that your depression isn't what you think it is? That every morning you wake up exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from the energy it takes to keep parts of yourself locked away? Most people treat depression like a malfunction, a chemical imbalance to be corrected, a mood disorder to be managed. But what if the numbness, the fatigue, the quiet despair, what if these aren't symptoms of something broken, but signals from something buried? Today we're going to talk about what depression actually is. Not the medical diagnosis, not the DSM category, but the psychological reality that lives beneath the label. The parts of you that were exiled so long ago, you forgot they existed, and now they're pressing down on your consciousness like a weight you can't name. This is about shadow-misalignment, and if you've ever felt like you're living a half-life, functional but not alive, this might be the most important thing you hear today. Let's start with who you've become. The version of you that gets up in the morning, goes to work, answers emails, smiles at the right moments. The you that performs. Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world without friction. And here's the thing. It works. It keeps you employed, keeps you liked, keeps you safe. But there's a cost. Because the persona isn't you. It's an adaptation. A survival mechanism built from the question, what do I need to be to stay loved, to stay safe, to stay accepted? And over time, that question becomes an architecture. You learn which parts of yourself are welcome at the table and which parts need to stay silent. The anger that rises when you're disrespected, exile it. The ambition that wants to demand more, too threatening, lock it away. The sensitivity that feels too much. The wildness that wants to create without permission. The desire that doesn't fit the script. All exiled. All pressed down into what Jung called the shadow, the repository of everything you decided was too dangerous to express. And here's where the misunderstanding begins. We think those parts disappear. We think if we ignore them long enough, they'll fade into nothing. But they don't vanish. They depress. Literally, they press down. And what we call depression is often the weight of an unlived life demanding to be seen. Have you ever noticed how certain people trigger you? How someone's confidence feels like an attack? How another person's freedom feels like a judgment? That's projection. That's your shadow showing you exactly what you've buried. Because the traits you exiled don't just sit quietly in the dark. They live, they pulse, they find ways to signal, I'm still here. You need me. Let me out. And if you don't listen, they get louder. They show up as exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, as numbness that no amount of distraction can penetrate, as a quiet, gnawing sense that you're living someone else's life. This is what Jung meant by enantiodromia, the principle that when something is pushed to an extreme, it flips into its opposite. Push obedience and adaptation far enough, and eventually you'll break. The suppressed emotions don't stay suppressed. They flood. The controlled persona doesn't hold forever. It fractures. And when that happens, most people think they're falling apart. But they're not falling apart. They're starting to come together. Because the breakdown of the persona is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating what was split off. Now let's zoom out. Because this isn't just a personal problem, it's a cultural one. We live in a world that rewards the functional self and punishes the real one. A world that tells you to be productive, be positive, be palatable. A world that gives you 1,000 ways to avoid feeling, scroll, shop, binge, numb. And the deeper truth? The numb version of you is more useful to the system. The angry version of you might set boundaries. The creative version of you might quit the job that's killing you. The alive version of you might stop performing and start living. And that's disruptive. So we're taught to pathologize the signal. You have depression. You need medication. You need to get back to normal. But what if normal is the problem? What if the life you're trying to return to is the life that exiled your soul in the first place? This isn't to say that medical intervention is wrong. Sometimes the body needs support to do the psychological work. But let's not confuse symptom management with healing. Because healing isn't about removing the sadness. It's about asking what the sadness is pointing toward. Here's what most people won't tell you about shadow work. It's terrifying. Because reclaiming the parts of yourself you exiled means facing the reasons you exiled them in the first place. And those reasons were survival level. You didn't suppress your anger for no reason. You suppressed it because expressing it once cost you love, safety, belonging. You didn't hide your ambition for fun. You hid it because reaching too high once made you a target. The parts of you that are now buried were once punished. And your psyche remembers. So when the possibility of integration arises, when the shadow starts knocking, the fear is primal. If I let that part of me out, I'll lose everything. If I speak my truth, I'll be abandoned. If I stop performing, I'll be unlovable. And so you stay split. You stay safe. You stay depressed. Because depression, in this light, isn't just a mood disorder. It's a protective mechanism that's outlived its usefulness. It's your psyche saying, I'd rather numb you than let you risk annihilation again. But here's the paradox. The protection is now the prison. The numbness that once kept you safe is now keeping you half alive. And the only way out is through. Let me be clear about what happens if you don't do this work. If you keep medicating the signal without addressing the source. If you keep perfecting the mask instead of meeting the face beneath it. The shadow doesn't disappear. It dominates from the dark. It shows up as chronic fatigue, as self-sabotage, as relationships that feel hollow because you're never fully present. It shows up as bitterness, as sarcasm, as a low-grade resentment toward the people who seem more alive than you. It shows up as a life that looks fine on paper, but feels like you're watching it happen to someone else. And the cruel part? The people around you often prefer the split version, because the split version doesn't ask for too much, doesn't make waves, doesn't demand authenticity in return. So there's a social reward for staying small. But the cost is your vitality. The cost is your life. So here we are, the climax, the moment where you decide which path to take. Path A. Keep coping. You can keep treating this as a problem to be solved. You can medicate the symptoms, optimize the routine, chase the next distraction. You can perfect the persona until no one, including you, can see the cracks, and you'll survive. You'll be functional, but you'll stay divided, and the exhaustion will remain, because it takes enormous energy to keep yourself split. Path B, integrate the signal, or you can start the descent. You can treat the depression not as a malfunction, but as a message. You can ask, what part of me is trying to come home? And then you do the work. Track your projections. What triggers you? What do you envy? Those are clues to what you've buried. Decode your dreams, not for symbols in a book, but for emotional logic. What wants to surface? Create sacred expression. Write the ugly truth. Move the stuck energy. Make something that doesn't need to be good, just honest. This is individuation. This is the shift from persona to presence. And it's messy. It's lonely at times. It's disorienting because you're becoming someone you've never been allowed to be. But it's also the only path to durable self-trust, the only path to a life that's yours. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Today, sit with the ache instead of fixing it. Don't reach for the phone, the snack, the noise, just sit and ask, which part of me is asking to be seen today, and how will I give it a small stage? Maybe it's writing one sentence of truth you've been avoiding. Maybe it's setting one boundary you've been too afraid to name. Maybe it's making something ugly just for you. One micro-action. One step toward integration. Because the shadow doesn't need you to fix it. It needs you to see it. And when you do, when you stop fighting the signal and start following it, that's when the depression begins to lift. Not because you removed the sadness, but because you integrated what was causing it. This is the work. And if this resonated, then the next battle is boundary repair. Learning to protect the self you're reclaiming from the people who preferred you split. But that's another conversation. For now, just start with the question, which part of you is knocking today? And will you open the door? The choice is yours.